The stillness of space was abruptly shattered as an anomaly appeared on the galactic radar of the Coalition's Central Command. At first, the sensors barely picked it up, just a faint signal, easily dismissed by lower-level analysts. But something about this signal didn't sit right. It was too direct, too precise, and it came from a direction that had been silent for years. The Coalition's AI system, known for its ability to detect even the slightest disturbances in space, began to register higher than normal energy emissions. Then the message came through. A sharp, urgent pulse echoed through the communication channels. The words were clear, direct, and chilling. Warning. Human warship approaching. The message hit the command center like a sledgehammer. The room went deathly silent. A few of the senior officers stared at the screens, their minds racing as they processed the weight of the words. The term human was one that carried little meaning among the higher ranks of the Coalition. They were a species from a small, insignificant corner of the galaxy, a race that had barely made it past their planetary wars. The thought of humanity being anything but a fleeting curiosity seemed absurd. "Check the transmission's authenticity," barked General Vornak, the grizzled leader of the Coalition's fleet. His voice was edged with disbelief. He knew the humans had sent out expeditions, but no one thought they had the capability to threaten the Coalition. The comms officer worked frantically, typing in commands. Seconds felt like hours as the digital matrix scrambled to analyze the signal's origin. "It's human, sir." "Verified," the officer replied, voice tinged with a mix of awe and terror. The room fell into a tense quiet as the realization dawned on them. Humans were not just back. They were on their way. And they were ready for something. "What is this?" Vornak muttered. "What do they want? And why now?" Commander Silas, a sharp tactician with years of experience, stepped forward, analyzing the situation. "Sir, this isn't just a random warning. It's a declaration, a challenge." It was then that the council on the other side of the galaxy began to stir. Across different systems, various factions within the Galactic Coalition began to react to the transmission. Some scoffed at the thought of humanity being a threat. After all, the humans were weak compared to the more powerful and ancient races. But there were others, those who had witnessed firsthand what humanity could do, who felt their hearts race with an all-too-familiar terror. "You know what this means," General Vornak said, his voice grim. "This isn't just another message. It's a warning, a threat." The older members of the council leaned in, muttering amongst themselves. Humanity was not as easily forgotten as the younger generations believed. There had been stories, whispers of their incredible resilience and the devastating war they fought against a species known as the Ravagers. Their victory over such an unstoppable force was one of the most improbable outcomes in galactic history, and yet the humans had managed it. It was not just their technology that made them dangerous, but their unyielding will to survive. If they had returned, it wasn't for peace. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of power. "We need to mobilize," Commander Silas said urgently. "We can't afford to underestimate them. Whatever their reason for coming, we need to be ready. We're not dealing with a mere backwater species anymore." A new dread settled over the Coalition Command Center. Not only did humanity have the audacity to return, but they had also sent this message with one undeniable purpose. They were coming, and they would not be ignored. Vornak's jaw clenched. He had heard the legends of humanity's battles, stories of their brutal tenacity and ingenuity in the face of impossible odds. What would happen if they truly came prepared this time? What if they were more than just survivors? What if they were coming to conquer? "Alert the fleet commanders," Vornak ordered. "We prepare for the worst. They're not just coming. They're bringing their war with them." The room in the Coalition's command center had descended into a heated frenzy. The revelation of the human warship approaching was a catalyst for the Council's deepest fears to surface. Around the long oval table sat representatives from the most powerful species in the galaxy, each one staring at the flickering display of the incoming human signal, trying to comprehend what it meant. The air was thick with unease. General Vornak slammed his fist on the table. We've all seen the records. The humans were nothing but a minor nuisance to us when they first appeared. And yet, here we are, afraid of their return. Why? What do they want now? Councillor Juris, the representative from the Ketheri, an ancient race known for their wisdom, spoke calmly. Fear, Vornak, is not always about what you see in front of you, but what you can't see. These humans have achieved something we thought impossible. They wiped out the Ravagers, a force that was, in every way, superior to them. And they did it not by brute strength, but by tactics, ingenuity, and an iron will. Vornak glared at him. Enough with the legends, Juris. What do we do about it? The room fell silent as the council pondered the question. The humans had been absent for years, only sending small expeditions and trade ships to explore the outer systems. But now, the unexpected warship, more advanced than anything they had ever seen, was on a direct course toward the heart of the coalition. Their intentions were unclear, but one thing was certain. The humans were no longer the underdogs of the galaxy. They were here to make a statement. Can we even stop them? Asked Rahl, the young commander of the Vorlon fleet. His species was one of the coalition's most formidable, and yet even he was visibly unnerved by the prospect of facing humanity's advanced warship. I believe it's possible, replied Silas, the sharp-tongued strategist. But it won't be easy. We'll need a united front. Every ship, every resource. Humanity has learned to adapt, and they've evolved into something more dangerous than we could have imagined. But we must strike first, before they have the chance to strike us. The thought of a preemptive attack hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, there was agreement across the room. But then, Vornak's voice broke the silence. If we attack, we risk provoking an all-out war. If they are as advanced as we believe, we may not survive the consequences. We've seen their power firsthand. Their technology is beyond us. We can't fight them in the conventional way. We'll be wiped out before we even know what hit us. The words struck a chord in the council. The idea of engaging humanity head-on was terrifying. They had all heard the stories. The humans' ability to turn the tide of battle in the most unexpected ways. Their adaptability, their resilience. They had once been an isolated species, struggling to survive on a dying planet. Now they were an emerging superpower with an ability to dominate, not just through force, but through every means available to them. We can't afford to underestimate them again. Councillor Solon, the representative from the Andorans, spoke up. The last time we did, humanity almost wiped out an entire armada. We cannot allow them to do that to us. Then what are you suggesting, Solon? Vornak pressed. What's the alternative? We have to negotiate, Solon replied. The room fell silent again. The suggestion was bold, but it carried a weight of logic. We send emissaries to the human warship. We try to understand why they've returned and what they want. If they've come in peace, we offer an alliance. If they've come for war, we will have to reconsider our options. The room erupted in disbelief. Some were shocked by the suggestion, others laughed bitterly. Negotiation with humans. The very idea seemed ludicrous. But Solon remained steadfast. They've shown us their power, he continued. We cannot afford to ignore that. But we also can't assume they'll want war. We have to find out their intentions before we do anything rash. Vornak was silent for a long moment, considering. The idea of parleying with humanity felt like a gamble, but the alternative, engaging in open warfare, could very well mean the end of the coalition. The galaxy was too fragile for such a conflict. Too much depended on the coalition's strength and unity. We'll send emissaries, Vornak finally said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. But I want our fleets on high alert. If this is a trick, if they've come to enslave us or destroy us, we will be ready. A murmur of agreement rippled through the council, but the tension in the room was palpable. Humanity had become an enigma, an unpredictable force that could tip the balance of power in the galaxy. The coalition had always prided itself on unity and strength, but now they faced something entirely new. A species that had survived against all odds and was now prepared to show the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. The decision was made. The emissaries would go, but the real question lingered. Would they return with a message of peace, or would they be the first victims of humanity's ruthless drive to survive? The tension in the Coalition Command Center reached a boiling point as the human warship entered the outer edges of the system. The sleek, massive vessel emerged from a rippling vortex of distorted space, its silhouette dwarfing anything the Coalition had ever seen. It didn't announce itself with fanfare or extravagant displays. It simply appeared, its cold, calculated silence enough to send a wave of unease through every onlooker. "The warship, it's here," Commander Silas whispered, his voice betraying a rare hint of fear. His sharp eyes scanned the holographic display, which now displayed the human warship in all its imposing glory. Unlike the Coalition's warships, which were a blend of sleek elegance and brute force, the human ship had an almost brutal, raw aesthetic. It was a testament to efficiency, with massive weapon arrays lining its surface and a hull reinforced with materials unknown to any galactic species. "Can we communicate with them?" General Vornak barked, trying to maintain control. The pressure was palpable. They had prepared to meet this challenge with diplomacy, but now that it was here, the uncertainty about how to proceed loomed over them like a storm cloud. "We've been trying, sir," said the comms officer, his fingers trembling as he punched in the communication sequence. "The signal is clear, but there's no response. It's almost as if they're ignoring our attempts." The human warship continued its course toward the heart of the Coalition's defenses, its engines humming with terrifying power. Every scan revealed more questions than answers. There were no signs of weapons primed for firing, no visible intent to attack. But there was also no sign of retreat, no indication that they were here for anything less than a serious confrontation. "How long before they reach us?" Vornak demanded, his impatience mounting. "We have 12 hours, replied Silas, his face pale. "We can't afford to wait any longer. We need to act." The human ship was moving steadily, showing no signs of stopping or slowing its advance. It was as if the humans were testing the Coalition's resolve, making their presence known in a way that felt deliberate. They had the power to decimate entire fleets with a single strike, yet they chose to show no aggression, no threat, at least, not yet. Suddenly, a communication ping broke the silence. The message was unmistakable, and it sent a shockwave through the room. The human warship had finally responded, not with words, but with a simple transmission. The screen flashed, and the cold, calculated voice of the human commander boomed across the room. "This is the United Terran Federation," the voice said, amplified by the ship's external speakers. "We have arrived. Do not mistake our presence for aggression. You will soon understand why we have come. But know this, we are not here to beg for your favor. We are here to ensure the galaxy knows who commands its future." The words hung in the air like an ultimatum. A chill ran down the spines of the Coalition's leaders. The audacity of the message was staggering. The humans were not here to negotiate. They were not here to ask for permission or beg for an alliance. They were here to assert their dominance, to make the galaxy aware that they were no longer the underdogs. They had come with a purpose, and that purpose was clear: to remind the Coalition of their place in the universe. Vornak's fist clenched in frustration. He had hoped for a peaceful resolution, but now it was evident that humanity wasn't interested in diplomacy. They were here to make a statement, and the Coalition would have no choice but to respond. "What do they want?" Counselor Solon muttered, his voice thick with concern. "Are they going to attack?" "We don't know," Silas replied, his mind racing through strategies. "But they've made it clear they want something. The question is, what?" The room was filled with uneasy whispers. The human warship, so immense and powerful, hung in the system like a dark omen. It was a reminder that the galaxy was not as stable as they had once believed. For centuries, The Coalition had been the undisputed power, the protector of peace and order across the stars. Now, a single human warship was threatening to upend everything they had built. The Council remained silent, each member lost in thought, weighing their options. A direct confrontation seemed inevitable. But could they survive such a battle? Could they withstand the power of a species that had defied every expectation? Outside the command center, the first wave of ships from the Coalition's fleet began to assemble, prepared for what was coming. The rest of the galaxy watched with bated breath, knowing that the outcome of this moment would shape the future of the universe. Humanity had arrived, and the world was about to learn just how far they would go to make their mark. The room fell into tense silence after the human commander's chilling broadcast. The words were simple, but the implications were far-reaching. The United Terran Federation was not here to negotiate. They were here to claim their place in the galaxy. But how? What had changed about humanity since they had disappeared from the galactic stage for so many years? To understand the true depth of the human threat, the Coalition's senior officers began reviewing the historical data that had been locked away in their archives. The last time humanity had made a significant impact on the galactic stage was during the Ravager Wars. The Ravagers were a race of bioengineered invaders from a distant galaxy who had nearly wiped out the Coalition's forces. Their technology and sheer brutality had left an indelible mark on the galaxy. They were, at one point, thought to be unbeatable. And then came the humans. The Coalition had underestimated them then. They had assumed that humanity, with their fragile biology and primitive technology, would be easy prey for the Ravagers. But humanity had done the impossible. They had turned the tide of war in the most unexpected of ways. Their tactics were unorthodox, their resolve unshakable. Against all odds, the humans had developed a weapon that tore apart the Ravagers' fleet, forcing them into retreat. It wasn't the sheer power of their ships that won the war. It was their ingenuity, their unyielding refusal to accept defeat. The history files showed images of human warships during that time, sleek and deadly, outfitted with devastating energy weapons and cloaking technology. They had relied on unconventional warfare, targeting weak points in enemy fleets, using surprise attacks, and employing strategies that no other species had the stomach to try. Humanity was relentless. They adapted and evolved, learning from every mistake, growing stronger with every battle. As the data played out before them, the fear that had begun to settle into the Coalition's heart turned into full-blown anxiety. What if the humans had continued to evolve during their years of isolation? What if their warships were far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen? General Vornak's mind raced as he thought back to his previous encounters with humanity. It was years ago, a fleeting interaction during the height of the Ravager Wars. The humans had been barely hanging on, but they had always managed to surprise him. It was that same unpredictability that now haunted him. The Terran Federation had vanished from the galactic stage, retreating into their own corner of the universe, and for a time, the galaxy believed they had been defeated. Now, they were back, and their return was anything but peaceful. "Sir," a voice interrupted Vornak's thoughts. It was Commander Silas, his face drawn with concern. "We've analyzed the human warship's energy readings. There's something else, something we didn't expect." "What do you mean?" Vornak's voice was sharp. "The human ship is using technology we've never encountered before. It's not just advanced weaponry. It's something far more dangerous. There's a gravitational pulse emitter integrated into their systems. We've never seen anything like it. It's capable of manipulating gravitational fields, creating massive energy distortions." The implications hit the room like a blow. A weapon capable of distorting gravity. It could tear apart enemy fleets without firing a single shot. Entire ships could be crushed under the weight of manipulated gravity, their structural integrity failing under the strain. It was a weapon of untold power, one that could turn the tide of any battle with devastating speed. The fear was palpable now. The Coalition had faced powerful enemies before, but none who could control the very fabric of space and time itself. This wasn't just a warship. It was a weapon of mass destruction, capable of wiping entire fleets from existence. "We cannot allow them to deploy that weapon," Vornak said, his voice steely. "We need to neutralize it before they have the chance to use it on us." But how? No one knew how to counteract gravity manipulation on such a scale. The Coalition's best minds scrambled for a solution, but it was clear they were in uncharted territory. Humanity's technology was leagues ahead of anything they had ever encountered. The warship's weapons could tear apart anything the Coalition had built, and this wasn't just a display of force, it was a statement. As the human warship neared, its gravimetric pulses sending ripples through the very fabric of space, the Coalition's ships scrambled to prepare. But the officers knew one thing with certainty: they were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and they brought with them the power to reshape everything. In the distance, the human warship loomed larger, its weaponry humming with deadly energy. The Coalition had no choice now. Their only option was to engage. But in their hearts, they knew the true battle was not one of weapons, it was one of will. And humanity, it seemed, had more than enough willpower to dominate them all. The Coalition's command center buzzed with activity as preparations for the inevitable confrontation escalated. Fleets were assembled, weapons were powered up, and battle strategies were rushed into place. Every officer, every strategist, knew one undeniable truth now: humanity had returned, and they were not here to make peace. The gravimetric weapon aboard their warship was a game-changer, one that could easily turn the Coalition's most formidable fleets into helpless debris. In the center of the room, General Vornak stared at the vast holographic map of the galaxy, his mind whirling. The human warship was now less than an hour away from the heart of Coalition space. The urgency of the situation left no time for hesitation. The Coalition was outmatched technologically, and Vornak knew it. They needed a way to neutralize the human threat, quickly and decisively. "Sir," Commander Silas's voice cut through the tense silence, "we've received another communication from the human warship." Vornak's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The cold, calculating voice of the human commander filled the room once again, sending a ripple of unease through the officers present. "This is Commander Ilara of the United Terran Federation. You have been given ample time to consider your position. Now, the choice is simple." A brief pause followed, and the voice took on a heavier tone, one that carried the weight of finality. "Withdraw your fleets and submit to the terms of the Federation. We will allow you to remain as you are, but know this: our power is beyond your comprehension. You cannot fight us and win. You will never be able to stand against us. This is your last chance." Vornak's jaw clenched. The words were more than just a threat. They were a cold, calculated declaration of dominance. Humanity had made its intentions clear. There would be no negotiations, no compromise. They were here to reshape the galaxy, and they would not be deterred by the Coalition's might. Commander Ilara's voice continued, now laced with an edge of finality. "If you choose to resist, if you refuse to bow to our power, we will show you just how easily we can obliterate everything you've built. Your fleets, your colonies, your very way of life. Gone. You have 12 hours to make your decision." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. Vornak stood motionless, processing the enormity of the ultimatum. "Do they truly believe we will bow to them?" Counselor Solan's voice broke the silence, disbelief etched into his words. "They cannot possibly think we'll surrender without a fight. I don't believe they care what we think," Vornak replied, his voice grim. "This is a test of our resolve. They want to see if we will yield, but we cannot afford to show weakness. If we do, we lose everything." "But we're outmatched," Silas interjected, shaking his head. "We're not just facing their technology. We're facing their mindset. They believe they are superior, and if we fight, we risk everything. They have the power to annihilate us with a single move." Vornak's eyes hardened. He had always prided himself on his strategic mind, but the situation before him was unlike any he had ever encountered. Humanity's warship, with its gravity manipulation technology, was beyond any force he could imagine. And yet, a voice within him stirred, refusing to give in. "I won't surrender," Vornak said, his voice low and fierce. "We fight, and we fight to win. We show them that the Coalition will never bow to anyone, not even humanity." There was a moment of tense silence before Silas nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "Then we prepare for war. We can't afford to hold back." "We'll need every advantage we can get," Vornak said. "Prepare the fleet for a full assault. I want every ship ready to move in 15 minutes. If humanity thinks they can walk all over us, they're about to learn just how dangerous we can be." The tension in the room was palpable as the officers began to make their preparations. Outside the command center, the Coalition fleet began to mobilize, its vast array of warships, dreadnoughts, and cruisers moving into position. The galaxy had never seen a force of such magnitude, and yet, for the first time in centuries, the Coalition felt the weight of vulnerability. As the fleet prepared for battle, Vornak stood alone before the holographic map, watching the trajectory of the human warship. It was clear now. The Coalition was no longer the unquestioned power in the galaxy. Humanity had come to remind them of that. They could either face the consequences of submission or make a stand. But Vornak knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was about to witness a war like no other. And humanity, for all their power, would learn that the Coalition was not so easily broken. The space around the Coalition's central command station became a flurry of motion as warships and dreadnoughts powered up their engines, preparing for the coming battle. The hum of their thrusters echoed across the command center as officers worked in a synchronized frenzy to position the fleets. The stakes had never been higher. The human warship was almost within firing range, and General Vornak knew this was their last chance to strike before the Federation's gravity weapon could be unleashed. "Sir," Commander Silas reported, his voice tight with urgency. "The human warship is initiating a deceleration burn. They're preparing to stop. It looks like they're about to make a move." Vornak's eyes hardened. This was the moment. There was no turning back. Every fleet in the Coalition, from the smallest frigates to the mighty dreadnoughts, had to work together in perfect synchronization. One mistake, and they would be decimated before they could even react. The odds were slim, but Vornak's resolve was unwavering. "We cannot let them dictate the terms of this confrontation," Vornak said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We take the initiative. Prepare the first wave. I want our ships in position, ready to strike." The first wave of Coalition ships, led by the flagship Saren's Wrath, moved out of the formation, charging toward the human warship. The sleek and deadly ships moved through space like a coordinated strike force, weapons primed and ready to deliver a devastating blow. The time for negotiation was over. This was war. As the fleets closed the distance, the human warship remained motionless, its imposing silhouette blocking out the stars in the distance. The tension was palpable. Every officer in the command center felt it. No one knew for sure what the human warship was capable of. But one thing was certain. If they didn't act quickly, the Coalition might never get another chance. "Target the weapon arrays," Vornak ordered. "We need to disable their ability to fight back. We cannot afford to waste time." The first volley of energy blasts from the Coalition ships rang out, their weapons cutting through the void of space. The beams were aimed with deadly precision at the human warship's outer hull, hoping to cripple its defenses before the real fight began. For a moment, it looked as though the attack had succeeded. The human warship's shields flickered, and its massive form shuddered as the blasts connected. But then, something unexpected happened. Without warning, the human warship shifted position in a flash of light, moving far faster than the Coalition had anticipated. The shots that had once seemed perfectly aimed now harmlessly sailed past, as the warship's gravitational pulse emitters hummed to life. The entire battlefield seemed to warp and twist as the human ship manipulated the very fabric of space around it, creating a shockwave of energy that rippled outward. "Impossible," Silas muttered. "Their gravimetric field. It's distorting the space around them. How are they moving like that?" The warship had shifted position with such speed that it defied all known principles of physics. In an instant, it was no longer a stationary target. It was as if the ship had vanished and reappeared somewhere else, its position now untraceable. And then, the worst possible thing happened. A pulse of energy shot from the human warship, a violent, unseen force that tore through the coalition fleet with terrifying ease. Several ships were instantly ripped apart, their hulls crumpling under the force of the gravitational distortion. Entire fleets of smaller vessels disintegrated in an instant, their components twisted and torn by the powerful weapon. The massive shockwave sent the remaining coalition ships scattering, their formations thrown into disarray. "Fall back! Fall back!" Vornak shouted, his voice tinged with a desperation he had never felt before. "Regroup. Regroup now." But it was already too late. The human warship had made its move. Its gravimetric weapon, now fully deployed, had demonstrated the sheer might of humanity's technology in a way no one could have anticipated. The coalition fleet was already crippled, and it had barely begun to fight. Vornak's mind raced as the battle unfolded before him. The few remaining ships in the fleet tried to maneuver, firing desperately, but the human warship was already moving again, its gravitational pulses creating ripples through the space around them. It was as if they were fighting against an invisible, godlike force that bent reality itself. "Sir," a voice called out from the comm station. "We're receiving another transmission from the human warship." Vornak stood, his eyes steely with fury and fear. He knew what this meant. The battle wasn't over, but humanity had made their point. The warship's power was undeniable. The cold, authoritative voice of Commander Ilara filled the room once more. "This is your final warning, General Vornak. You've seen what we're capable of. Withdraw now, and you may save what remains of your people. Resist, and you will be erased. The choice is yours." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving only the ghostly silence of the command center. The damage was done. The Coalition's fleet had been shattered in a matter of moments. The humans had shown no mercy, no hesitation. They were here for one thing, and one thing only: dominance. Vornak's grip on his chair tightened as he looked around the room, at the men and women who had served under him for so long. The faces before him were filled with a mixture of fear and resolve, but Vornak knew one thing above all else. This battle was far from over. The coalition would not go down quietly. "Prepare for the next phase," Vornak muttered to himself, his voice low. "We will not yield. Not today. Not ever." The coalition's fleet was in disarray. What had been a mighty force, built over centuries of domination, now looked like scattered debris in the wake of the human warship's first strike. Ships floated aimlessly, crippled and battered, with whole sections torn asunder by the devastating gravitational pulses. The few remaining vessels were too far scattered to form any kind of cohesive defense. Inside the command center, General Vornak stood, his eyes locked onto the holographic display of the battlefield. His fingers clenched into fists at his sides as he watched his fleet fall apart, piece by piece. The humans had not only destroyed their ships, they had shattered their confidence. "Report," Vornak growled, his voice tight with frustration. "We've lost nearly half our fleet, sir," Commander Silas replied, his tone grim. "Most of the smaller ships are gone. The remaining capital ships are severely damaged, and our communications with the outer colonies have been cut off. We can't continue the fight with the forces we have left." The room fell silent as the full weight of their failure sank in. Vornak's eyes narrowed as he scanned the remaining ships in their fleet. A few dreadnoughts still held firm, though they were limping, their weapon systems failing under the strain of the earlier attacks. But despite the devastation, there was still a fire in Vornak's heart. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice low but resolute. "We've been backed into a corner, but we still have a chance. We'll fight on our terms, and we'll make them regret ever underestimating us." Silas raised an eyebrow, confused. With what? They've already demonstrated their overwhelming superiority. Their gravimetric weapon alone can decimate us in seconds. How do you propose we fight back? Vornak turned to face him, eyes gleaming with an intensity that defied the odds stacked against them. "We know one thing. They've underestimated us. They may have power, but they lack our ingenuity, our resolve. We're not going to win this battle through force, but we can outsmart them. We can force them into a position where their technology doesn't give them the advantage." Silas frowned, still unsure. "How?" "We use their own weapon against them," Vornak said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "We don't need to destroy their ship. We need to cripple their gravimetric systems. We know their weakness. The same weapon that gives them power also creates a distortion field that's vulnerable to certain frequencies. If we can disrupt it, even for a few seconds, we might be able to land a decisive blow." The room was silent as the officers processed his plan. It seemed impossible, fighting a warship that could manipulate gravity itself with a tactic that required them to operate at the edge of the unknown. But as the seconds ticked by, and the harsh reality of their situation settled in, the officers began to realize that this might be their only chance. "We'll need to act fast," Vornak continued. "Gather the remaining ships. I want every ship capable of transmitting the disruptor frequency to focus on the human warship's gravimetric field. We don't have much time. Once they realize what we're doing, they'll adapt." Commander Silas nodded, though his face betrayed his fear. "Aye, sir. I'll get the engineers working on the frequency modulator immediately." The command center erupted into frantic activity as officers relayed orders, and the remaining ships began to form a new strategy. It was a desperate gamble, one that could either cripple their enemy or leave them completely exposed to the next devastating attack. Outside, the human warship loomed, cold and silent, its presence a constant reminder of the overwhelming power the Federation held. But for the first time since the battle began, the Coalition's officers felt a glimmer of hope. The humans had shown them their power, but now the Coalition was about to show them what they were capable of when cornered. "Once we get the frequency disruptor online," Vornak said, "we'll have one shot. We'll hit them with everything we have and take out their gravimetric system. If we can do that, we'll level the playing field. And if we can't..." He let the threat hang in the air, a cold, stark reality. The truth was that the Coalition had no other choice. They either succeeded, or they would cease to exist as the dominant force in the galaxy. Back in the control room, Vornak's mind raced, his thoughts sharp and focused. The Federation's warship was more than just a ship. It was a symbol. It was a declaration that the galaxy was changing, that humanity was no longer a minor player in the grand scheme of things. But the Coalition would not let the tide of the galaxy turn so easily. If they had to die defending their way of life, they would. "We will fight," Vornak said with a resolve that left no room for doubt. "And we will not go quietly into the night." The tension in the command center was palpable as the final preparations were made. The battlefield outside was a storm of chaos, but within the Coalition's command room, there was only focus. The officers were ready for what would be the final confrontation. The fate of the galaxy was now hanging by a thread, and Vornak's next move would decide everything. The battlefield was quiet, an eerie calm before the storm. The remaining ships of the Coalition fleet, battered and bruised, slowly closed in around the human warship. The Saren's Wrath led the charge, its weapon systems primed for what would either be a glorious victory or a final tragic failure. General Vornak stood tall at the helm, eyes locked onto the human warship, his mind sharp, focused entirely on the task at hand. "Commander Silas," Vornak's voice rang out, commanding and steady. "Is the disruptor modulator ready?" Silas nodded, his expression tense. "It's online, sir. The frequency is locked in and ready to deploy. We'll have a window of approximately 3 seconds before the human warship's systems adapt. If we don't hit them in that time, we're finished." Vornak's gaze hardened. There was no room for failure now. The plan was risky, and the human warship's gravimetric weapon had already proven to be a force of unimaginable power. But the Coalition had no other choice. This was their last shot. "Prepare the fleet. Target the gravimetric systems," Vornak commanded, his voice unwavering. "We strike together, all at once. No hesitations." The remaining ships in the Coalition fleet moved into formation, their weapons primed for the assault. In the silence of space, the last moments of preparation felt like an eternity. The human warship hung in the distance, unmoving, cold, and menacing. Its power was palpable, radiating through the void like a silent promise of destruction. Then, without warning, the Coalition fleet sprang into action. Waves of energy blasts surged from their ships, each one a calculated strike aimed at the heart of the human warship's gravimetric system. The ships released their payloads in perfect synchrony, hoping to overwhelm the warship's defenses before the frequency disruptor had to make its move. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the human warship would remain unscathed. Its shields flickered and pulsed, absorbing the incoming blasts. But the power of the Coalition's firepower was undeniable. The warship groaned, its hull rippling with the energy of the impact. Then came the sound that no one aboard the Coalition fleet could have anticipated. The warship's gravimetric pulse generator faltered, its distortion field beginning to destabilize. "It's working," Silas exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief. "The gravimetric weapon is offline. They're vulnerable." Vornak's heart raced, but there was no time to savor the moment. The frequency disruptor had created the opening they needed, but the warship's crew would not give up so easily. A massive burst of energy flared from the human warship as its gravimetric pulses began to recalibrate. It was recovering, and fast. "Brace for impact," Vornak shouted. Just as the disruptor began to falter, the human warship shifted again, faster than any ship had a right to move. The entire battlefield seemed to ripple as the gravimetric weapon fired once more, sending out shockwaves that distorted space itself. The Coalition fleet reeled as their ships were thrown off course, but the Saren's wrath held firm. "We've only got one shot left," Vornak growled. "Prepare the final assault. Target their core." With every ship now focused on a single vulnerable point, the heart of the human warship, Vornak knew this was the moment that would decide everything. There was no room for error. The Federation's warship, despite its advanced technology, was now struggling, its systems crippled by the Coalition's efforts. The Saren's wrath fired a final volley of concentrated energy blasts, aimed directly at the exposed core of the warship. The beams collided with the heart of the human vessel, the impact echoing across the battlefield, as the warship seemed to shudder violently in response. For a brief moment, it looked as though the human warship might collapse, its massive frame buckling under the force of the Coalition's assault. But then, something shocking occurred. The human warship's core flared with an intense, blinding light. A ripple of energy pulsed outward, dwarfing anything the Coalition had thrown at it. The gravitational distortion field, which had momentarily faltered, surged back to life with terrifying power. The Coalition ships were once again caught in its grip, the very fabric of space and time around them, twisting and warping. Several ships were torn apart in the blink of an eye, their hulls shattered, their crews lost in an instant. "Retreat," Vornak bellowed, knowing that they could not withstand another attack. But it was too late. The human warship had regained its strength, and its gravimetric weapon was more than capable of crushing what remained of the Coalition fleet. One by one, the Coalition ships were torn apart by the pulse of the gravimetric weapon. The final remnants of the once great fleet scattered, broken, and defeated. In a matter of moments, the war was over. Vornak stood in the command center, his heart heavy with the knowledge of the inevitable. The Federation had proven their superiority, and the Coalition, for all their power and pride, had been no match for them. The transmission from the human warship crackled through the comm system once more. Commander Ilara's voice was calm, almost disinterested, as she spoke. "This was your last warning, General Vornak. Your resistance has been noted. The galaxy will remember. But know this, your failure was inevitable. You are no longer a threat. Your people will be allowed to live, but you will never rule this galaxy again." The transmission ended, and with it, the final chapter of the Coalition's reign. Vornak's gaze never wavered as he stared at the shattered remnants of his fleet. The Coalition had fought with everything they had, but humanity had proven that power, in the end, was not enough. And so, the galaxy shifted. Humanity had arrived, and the old order had fallen.